this happened to me in yoga the other day. There's a teacher I really like, but she kept saying this thing in the class. I guess it's something that people say sometimes in yoga, like, set yourself up for success. And she kept saying it, to try to get us to get our alignment right for a pose. But, then she was also using it as a metaphor for success in your life and success in business. And I was like sitting there going, you know what? This is not my idea of yoga. And it's the same thing I go through when a yoga class focuses on visualize everything you want. So let me just say a moment about success, because I think it has come up on the forum as well. To me, this is the irony of offering everything to the divine. Often, the greatest spiritual growth and so-called success comes from failure. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. I mean, it is often when things don't happen the way the ego wants that this massive breakthrough occurs, and you suddenly blast through to this place of realizing that you're divine and that you belong to God. It often doesn't happen when, you're busy going, oh, I just won 12 contests and I just, was on David Letterman or, whatever. It's often not that, although there's nothing wrong with those things. But it often happens when somebody's like, oh, my God, my husband left me and I ended up on my knees, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, I'm the goddess on my knees over this. So, and I'll tell you my favorite example of that. I can't remember if I talked about it before, but my favorite example of that is Hafiz. My beloved Hafiz, the Persian poet that I love so much, the Sufi poet, because Hafiz was madly in love with this baker's daughter who did not love him back. She wasn't attracted to him. I heard he wasn't exactly the world's most physically attractive guy. He just happened to be like the saint that was going to wake up the whole world. But, she didn't want him. And he was so devotional. I'm sure I told this story probably at the beginning of one of the early weeks, but it's just so worth telling again. He was so madly in love with her, and he was writing her all these love poems and blah, 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 and she didn't want him. And eventually, he started to have to take that energy to God because he was devastated. And that action, that despair, that this girl that he was so attracted to was not attracted back, is what eventually turned him into this amazing being. And, in a way, I kind of think if she'd loved him back, he'd be like Hafiz, the guy who loved the baker's daughter. But instead, he became like Hafiz, this awakened being. And I don't see this you don't get the partner too, if, that's meant to happen. I think by the time he woke up, he could care less. He was like, oh my God, who cares? But, I think everybody's path is different. And for some people, absolutely, if your soul needs the partner, you get the partner. But that's not the issue. The issue is that the failure, he failed. He totally failed. And that's what flung the whole door open. He couldn't bear the pain anymore of the rejection. And he had to find a place to give that love to the one who really deserved it, which is the divine. Because once you give that love to the divine inside, then everything else, is just icing on the cake. So to me, that's the consummate story of how failure is the ultimate success. It's this fixation on worldly success, the way the New Age world has it. To me, it's that's fine. You want to focus on that, that's fine. But it has nothing to do with what creates the intimacy. on the inside. Now, I'm not saying you need to chase failure either, but it just often is that in this world of opening to divinity, failure is often the medicine that comes to help the person wake up. Maybe it's what gets the ego out of the lead. Or maybe it's that, often you see things like the person gets all this stuff that they think they wanted, and it's all fun for a while, and then all of a sudden something happens, and, all of a sudden their partner is looking at somebody else, or all of a sudden, the job that they loved leaves, or, something happens, and they go, wait a minute. I need to find something that's more stable than all these outer things for my security. Because each one of them actually comes from the divine. It's kind of like focusing on the trees instead of knowing that they're all part of this massive forest. And as soon as you go, wow, it's not the individual tree or it's not the individual river, there's actually this ocean that you are, then it all gets so much easier. And sometimes it's the failure that is the jolt. And then you go, oh my God, I was the goddess, I was divinity all this time, thinking that those things were it. Then those things can come. That's the irony. I've said it a lot before, but those things can come, and you're no longer a slave to them. So just had to throw that in. Because for some reason this week, people started writing that stuff about success, and I think it's very germane. It's like in the New Age world, you get this thing. It's almost a kind of bragging. I visualized this, and in only 14 days, I got a $1 million book deal, or I visualized. And I'm thinking, you know what? Like, who cares? Who cares? What matters is the intimacy with the divinity. And then whatever comes ends up being like a bonus prize from the divine. All these kind of things can come if they're meant to, but you're like, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God. They're not created by the small self. They're like showers from the divine.